Hello and welcome back to another episode of my Let's Build series. Now, I thought that as I hadn't shown in the last episode the interiors that I'd built, I thought that I'd start off just by showing you some of the rooms that I'd made. So we've come in through the main house and into the corridor, and now we're going to proceed to the first alchemy room that I set up, complete with brewing stands, desks, and also a little skull on the table just for the teacher, who's a bit of a Shakespearean, I think. Then returning down, we can move into the auditorium that I created, where the larger lectures are going to occur. I've got various charts on the wall and also a enchanted book that teachers can read from. It's a bit of a dark room, unfortunately, but I can't do too much about that. And then we come out the side door, which is going to take us towards one of the main courtyards and towards the bell tower. I'm really happy with how that turned out, and I quite like the way I've got the railing set up on the staircase. And from here we're now going to start building up the university more. I'm going to start adding in more classrooms, more workshops, and another auditorium, and I'm going to be experimenting with various different building shapes just to really get the feeling of Mains from the Name of the Wind. So I started off trying to create irregular shapes. I had the idea of two buildings that were going to clash with one another, and maybe creating another building that was going to lead to a second floor, so that it felt like a bunch of classrooms that had been put on top of another set of classrooms. I started off by replacing all of the wool outlines with cobblestone, which I was using as the basis for most of my buildings, and then built up using stone brick, and of course using the birchwood flooring that I've been using for most of my buildings. I built up a basic platform by creating the roofs of the buildings, and then cut back just a little bit so that I could create more room, which you'll see me doing just now. This way I'll be able to create hopefully an extra little street almost on the top, as I don't want the upper rooms to be accessible via staircase, because as small as they are, I can't afford to make them any smaller. I then experimented with different clay blocks for different kinds of roofs, and then thought about how these two buildings were going to stand next to each other and how they were going to look against one another. I didn't want them looking too similar, because otherwise it just wouldn't quite match the theme of the book. Here I decided to create a large building and thought about creating a massive slanted roof going from one wall to the other. Thought about using maybe bricks instead of the typical clay that I've been using, as it had quite a nice effect but wasn't too red. So it was quite nice, it wasn't too bright, it sort of blended in quite nicely. And then came out one, as I do on all of my roofs, to make sure that nothing looks too chunky. I sort of imagined that the room would be something of a workshop. I also came around the outside and added some cobblestone walls to prevent it from falling off. But I also found that it created a really nice tiered effect. Then I came around to this small building, which I added in a small sitting room at the bottom, but the main function of this building was just to provide access to the upper floor. As you can see, I've come along and created a little side passage here, but unfortunately because of the roof I had to bring the floor down a little bit and add stairing in instead, so that it was accessible. But unfortunately, because of the way the cobblestone wall transforms when you place it next to it, I think it came out quite nice. I also added a few support pillars, which I think added a nice effect. I really like the new texture, I've got to say, of the old one. It feels like it's a lot better. Now here I'm building another auditorium, but I didn't want it to be the same dark grinchy colours as all the other ones, so I decided to use birchwood logs instead to get a really bright colour and to continue using the white stained clay that I'd used on the previous buildings. And then built up a simple stage of oak planks to contrast against the birchwood steps. Thought about how I was going to cap this roof and thought that having it simply flat would be the best. birchwood again, as I'd really liked how the auditorium had turned out, and thought that another really bright building on this side of the university would really just help create a big patchwork to make everything look really different. I settled on hardened clay after going through various different materials, not quite deciding to go with white stained clay this time, as I felt that as the building nearby was also using it, it was a little too familiar. I also put in a good number of windows, as I thought that a workshop would need a lot of natural light and maybe also something to make sure that you're getting plenty of fresh air. I came in and started outlining where the desks were going to be, using crafting benches to add a little bit of texture because of the way they morph in this new texture pack, using half stone steps to half wooden slabs to create a desk effect, and adding in a chair for those students and also want a longer desk for the teacher. Now for the roof, I considered making another slanted roof as I had on one of the previous buildings, but making it significantly shorter. I didn't quite want it going all the way, so I used half slabs to try and create that effect. However, I felt that it rose too high, so I ended up trying to create a slimmer effect, as though something had pushed down on the roof and it had been flattened, and I was quite happy with how it turned out in the end. I also added a few trapdoors just to the edges of the logs, just to add a bit of texture. And on the inside I decided to add some glowstones, just to make it a bit brighter, and I also added some chests along the walls, where all the tools and all their little resources would be collected. I also added a little well, as I mentioned earlier, just as a little extra touch, whilst I was thinking about how I was going to build my next building, which I thought was going to be mainly a giant stone building, to really contrast against the hardened clay and wood of the various buildings nearby. Here I'm just building up the framework. I wondered how I might connect these two floors, whether I'd have a staircase on the outside of the building to sort of emphasise how different things were, but thought that creating a staircase on the inside would be a lot more interesting, as I haven't done that before. So here you can see me partitioning off a staircase and also thinking about how the ceiling's going to interact. Because of the way the building, or rather the place that the building is positioned, it's sort of hitting the roof of the new workshop that I set up earlier. So I've ended up indenting the stone wall on the inside, which I think kind of adds more to the building, just to stop it being so blocky. At the bottom I added in desks and also some bookcases, and I've also used some item frames on the walls to add saws, various other tools, just to make it look like the students have been doing some work in here. And then when I came to the upstairs, just to contrast with the floor a bit, I used spruce wood instead, but ended up replacing the desks with stone materials, as I thought that would be a bit more interesting to see something different. Maybe they're using heavier tools in here, or doing different kind of projects that are going to burn the wood if it hits their desks. I then went through the paintings again, adding in different pieces and banners just to flesh out the rooms a bit more, and then started adding some windows. But I didn't want it too linear, as I thought this room was going to be quite irregular. I came to the roof and started experimenting with a material I hadn't used before, but wondered about. I thought about how in medieval times some roofs would have been made of a similar material, and I thought that this block is quite underused, but it could make for a really nice roof that would be vastly different from anything else I make. There you have it. It was a short episode, admittedly, but that's because I've sped through it and I've put in a lot of work, and I've sped up the video quite a bit because of all the tedious planning underneath it all. But I have added to the mains. I feel that there are quite a few classrooms, all fully fleshed out and ready for teaching. And I'm really happy with the look of it. It all looks quite random, to be honest, and it all feels quite disjunction, but I feel that it's the sort of place you could get lost in really easy. And it's the sort of place that you'd want to explore for a few hours because it's just so strange and confusing. I added a little staircase here and also put up some fences next to it just to add a bit of an effect to it, and I thought that that would be a good way as a second lead-in to the university. There are about 3 in total, with the main house and also one next to the buildings that are on top of each other. might be that if I have more time towards the end of the build, that I'll come back and add in some more buildings. I'm not sure how much time I'll have at the end of it, as I'm hitting a very fine deadline. However, for the moment, I'm very happy with mains. I feel that I've really accomplished it, and I feel that with a bit of extra time maybe, that mains could become a fully flourishing city almost. I also see quite a bit of room that I could possibly add on top of the auditorium, maybe adding a third tier to the university. But as I said, for the moment, I feel that I've put in quite a good amount of effort for this. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me once again in this Let's Build series. I'm now going to be moving on to Muse, the Mess and also Hollows, with Muse being the biggest project of the next episode, and I hope you join me for it, and thank you very much for watching.